And I think that one of the more damaging narratives in our specific industry, and it likely extends to others, is this idea that like creativity is a person alone in a room and like a light bulb goes off and they have this great idea, right? And like
Right.
that is so counter to every campaign and every brand work, every marketing campaign, every political campaign that I've been on. It's like the best ideas have come when people are in a room talking and all sharing their best thinking. Like the best thing comes forward, and it's this like iterative, collaborative thing gets you to the best result. Way more than like, I'm going to hire that genius to come up with genius ideas.
Let's talk about creating a life and country we're proud of. Together, I'm your host, Alvina Vasquez. Welcome to Alvina Talks Shift. Hi, Rob. It's so good to have you on Alvina Talks Shift. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me. This is my first podcast interview ever as a participant.
It's funny when people say thanks for coming by, like we're in a TV studio. We're not. We're on Zoom. Or not Zoom, but some digital communication device.
But I get to see your living room, and you get to see my office / guest room. So like that feels like I came by, right?
It does. But a little bit of background of how we met. It's been like 10 years, actually, Rob. Rob was kind of one of my first mentors when I moved over into the political space from the broadcasting space. So I actually learned a lot from you.
Thanks for saying that. I was listening to this podcast. I was listening to I think it was you and Olivia.
Oh my God.
Would that be right?
Yeah.
And you were talking about sort of that same time period, right? Of like you coming into the political space and doing fun stuff. I think you met her through redistricting stuff, right? And I was doing that, and it all got together, and it I felt very nostalgic. It's like because it feels like in those days, like at least I did, lived and breathed the work. Whereas like now I got a kid, I got a house, I got to do the work now.
You got to do the work.
And I think I do it well, but it felt different.
Well, I think one thing that felt different, which is what I wanted to talk to you about, is we were in person. We were always together. Like our crew was always together. We were in meetings constantly, like Zoom meetings was not a thing. Conference calls were a thing, and those are useful. To this day, I think conference calls are easier for me than video calls. I tend to get more distracted when I'm on the video. Conference calls, I seem to focus better. Yeah. But things have changed so much since we were doing like communications work pre-pandemic and post-pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think generally for the worse, in my opinion. As a there was this I think it was a Geico ad with a camel that was like,
oh my God, that
walking
was
around the office
ad. I remember that.
Days. Right. And we used to say it, hey, Mikey. He would like say a line, and you and I would say it as we walked past each other's office, right? Like every time. And it was awesome. And that like doesn't happen anymore. Like from an office perspective, right? Like that was a fun joke that made my day better for 30 seconds.
I know.
And like now I've got to look at YouTube videos or something. And I just think that that's a little off. It's different, right? It's different. And I think we miss that as a society. And I think we definitely miss it in communications. The other, it's happening everywhere too, if I may get on the soapbox for a bit. Like we don't even go to the grocery store anymore. Like that little bit of human interaction with the person checking you out, we don't do that anymore. And like dating, we like don't go to the bar and just like pick a stranger and like just start talking to them, right?
Yeah.
To see what happens and to see like what funny or interesting happens. I remember this was before I was married and still dating. There's me and a couple buddies were at a bar, and there were two women like looking at the apps. And what we did is took a picture of all three of us on my phone and be like, hey, could you guys scroll through and see if any of these guys? It's like this app is called People Next to You at the Bar.
Well, that's when things were changing. What was it, like 2015?
Yeah, that would have been, I met my wife in 2016. So 2015 would have been right around then.
So how has that changed the dynamics for the work that you do?
Well, I think that I was literally right before this was talking to my team about like how we market ourselves and how we get out there. And I think what we want to stake out, and I think is an important part for people to be doing generally, organizations, businesses, is being counter to that. I think, you know, people remember ad campaigns and communications that look and feel different, that stand out. And so like right now, I think the way to do that is to feel personal, is for it to feel like you're in touch with another human being. And I think you can do that in like random in sort of broadcast communications. You can do that in a TV ad or a social media ad. But I think it's more important to like live it. Like we're really trying to stake out this space of like in-person marketing, of marketing that puts people in touch with each other and communication, where they get to learn together and experience things together. And I just think that we will rebuild a lot of what we lost if we can focus on that as a sector. I think you and I do very similar work, so that the types of clients we're working with, I think if we can sort of convince them, convince political campaigns, convince businesses that care about community to really think about this as as a form of marketing, I think it'll repair some of what feels lost. Yeah, this is pie in the sky goals, but I think it's reflected in our politics. Obviously, I don't want to get into like, all we do is yell at each other. That's not new, but it's even reflected in like, I watch a lot of sports, and if you watch like sports, there is no sports journalism really anymore. But if you watch just like sports TV, it's just like four people yelling at each other. It's just like four people who are like, I've got a different opinion and I'm going to yell at you. You know what I mean? It's like, we're not learning anything. We're not doing anything together.
Even sports shows do that?
Yeah. Sports shows are like worse than political shows, I think.
Wow.
They like intentionally get like loudmouth dudes to just like yell at each other.
Wow.
And I think that that creates this like, I've got to get my opinion. I got to carve out this niche for me, right? And like my thing. Whereas I think if we're doing stuff in person and we're learning and the brands that we're working with are saying, hey, we want this to be a collective experience, you start to bring back humanity in a lot of ways. And I really I just think that could go so far. That's not the only, but such an important step in repairing politics, in repairing just a sense of like neighborhoods and community, that we need to start doing stuff together again. And I think that as marketers, as communicators, we play a role in that, and I think we should, and I think it'd be exciting. That was a pretty long answer.
So what do you practice in your personal life, not your professional life?
Yeah.
To like move that? Like, what are your practices?
Yeah. Can I take a sip of coffee? Is that allowed on a podcast? My wife just delivered a very awesome lavender mocha or something.
Ooh.
Oh, it's a chai.
I'm in your living room, of course.
Yeah. What do I do? Well, you and I do work days occasionally, and I've loved those, right? Like making sure that I'm getting out, even though I work from home and work for myself, like make sure I get out and be in public. I always, if I'm doing work stuff, offer an in-person meeting first. Like Zoom is the last option.
Yep.
And so say, hey, we should meet about this in person. I think that that's really important. And I bet you it gets me 50% more in-person meetings than like what's normal these days. And that feels good. Like I get to connect with people. I get to do it. I go, I go shopping in person.
I go shopping.
I try and do that stuff. Like even if it's just Target, like I get to go into Target and pick up my stuff and talk to a cashier and talk to one other shopper, even if it's just like, sorry, you know what I mean? There's like a human interaction part there. So those are big ones. I like try and really make sure I take my son out to public places and talk to strangers. We've got a brewery at the end of the block. And during the pandemic, they closed down their parking lot and have kept it closed since then. It's awesome. Cerebral. I don't know if we're allowed to pitch, places to go, but your listeners should go there. It's they got a bunch of picnic tables. Gus has become so familiar that he'll like run around the entire place and like inevitably talks to somebody else that's there, and like somebody else makes comments, and like making sure he gets experience, and it just feels normal to like talk to other people in our neighborhood. I really intentionally try and call everybody around us neighbors. He's like, and it throws him off. He's like, I thought the neighbors were Bob and Christian. It's like, no, our neighbors are like this entire group of folks. Those are sort of big ones, like making sure I'm doing the things, anything that's possible in person, I'm doing it. Making sure that I'm bringing my son so that he doesn't see this sort of like settle into this, like, oh, we just get everything from our computers and that's it. That stuff feels all really important. I talked to the Lyft driver. We're doing like a 1-car household thing. And I like, hey, what's your name? How's your day been? Like when I get in, it's like, and maybe we don't talk for the rest of it, right? There are plenty of them where like we do pleasantries and it's gone, but I at least make sure that I know the name of the person whose car I'm riding in.
Well, that's interesting because even as like a sole proprietor, which I was and you were, and you are by yourself so much. And for me, I need to be around people to be creative. Like it's really hard for me to be creative when there's nobody to bounce ideas off of or turn a bad idea into a good idea. And I think that's what I miss from our creative meetings that we'd have with our colleagues is we'd come up with the craziest ideas that could really shift the narrative on the message. Of course, there's a lot of bad ideas, but even bad ideas are fun to execute.
Yeah. And they're worth it. Like a bad idea that's creative and brings in different things, I think is better than a good idea. That's like, I think I really appreciate it because I feel that same way. And I think that one of the more damaging narratives in our specific industry, and it likely extends to others, is this idea that like creativity is a person alone in a room and like a light bulb goes off and they have this great idea. Right. And like, that's just that is so counter to every campaign and every brand work, every marketing campaign, every political campaign that I've been on. It's like the best ideas have come when people are in a room talking and all sharing their best thinking. Like the best thing comes forward, and it's this like iterative, collaborative thing gets you to the best result. Way more than like, I'm going to hire that genius to come up with genius ideas.
Well, one thing you didn't bring up that you practice.
And you were one of the best.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I was so excited. We're working on a project again together. And I've been telling my team over and over, I was like, Alvina, guys, our work's going to be better because we're partnering with Alvina on this. Like, she's like the best to like bat ideas around with.
We had so much fun. I mean, we still do whenever we get to work together. But one thing I think that you failed to mention that you do to bring people together is you own a bar.
Yeah. I wore it today because
I know that's what I thought of it.
Some free we do very little messaging and marketing. Yeah, that's a great point. I own Bread Bar, which is in Silver Plume, Colorado, and that feels like it's a side project. I've never made $1 off the thing. I've made some tips, but I've never actually like taken home income. But I think the reason I love it so much is it's the embodiment of all that. Instead of doing it for work, I just get to go up and bartend or just hang out as my staff bartends and like see community building and these connections being made in real life in a place that I own, which feels like magical every time. I think my favorite is, have you been, Alvina?
I haven't been yet.
To Bread? No. Have you been to Silver Plume? So no. Silver Plume is a town. So it's like 45 miles west of Denver. It's like an old Western town. They've never paved the streets. It feels like you're walking down an old West Main Street. And I think the people that live there and have moved there have sort of done so intentionally because they want that. They want a place that feels different in a way. You know, and then a lot, we're big on Instagram. We're a hipster bar, as much as I hate to say it. So we bring in a very hipster Denver crowd that is like app focused and found us through technology. It's these two pretty different lifestyles of people, but they all come to our bar and they meet and they talk, and it's like, it warms my heart when I see like a couple locals talking to a couple of our like Denver fans and Denver customers, and like they talk about stuff. Who knows what they talk about? But they're connecting, and they're like seeing this other lifestyle that's just an hour away, but like it's pretty different than if you're you know, a tech worker in downtown Denver. It's very different than most of the folks working up in and living up in Silver Plume. And I love that, like that common space that they're sort of sharing bread or sharing a cocktail in this case. Is it those moments I think are what drive me in my work.
So, I mean, owning a bar, like owning any kind of venue like that, is a lot of work and super intimidating. What gave you the courage to do that? Like, how did that idea even come up? All I knew was that it existed. I never knew what happened to get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had it. I think it was courage is an interesting word. I wouldn't call it that, but we'll see. I would love your take on whether this was courage or not. After, so I had been in a relationship with a woman I loved for a long time prior to that, and we broke up. You know, relationships end for a number of reasons, but like still had a lot of respect for each other. It was a parting of ways, but it was low. You know, she got to keep the house we were living in. She got to keep the cooler of the two cars we had, and she got to keep the cat. So I was like living on a friend's couch, like low down. And Steve Fenberg sent me there was like a Zillow post for Bread Bar. The previous owners were selling it. They were sort of outgrew the space and were moving. And so he sent it, and I kind of like looked around and was like, well, what else am I doing? Like, I need something to fill this hole. And we went up there. It was coming up 8 years ago. It was March, and it was a March day. And it was one of those Colorado spring days where like beautiful, sunny, but there's still snow that's melting. Birds are starting to chirp. And we went up there, and like the light in the canyon, it literally felt like a cartoon where like the clouds open and light shines down on the thing you're supposed to do. It was like, oh, this makes sense. Like, this is cool. We were both really interested, and we were both kind of like, well, we don't have a ton of restaurant or bar experience. And he was just about to go into his first, he was like running for the legislature at that point for the first time. So we knew he wasn't going to have a ton of time. And I was working at the round table, had maybe just stopped, but was trying to start my own. I think that's it. I was trying to be an independent, you know, freelance communications guy for the first time. And I was like, well, I'm going to need to dedicate a fair amount of time to getting that off the ground. And we found two other people who could do it, and they both had a little bit more restaurant. One's a marketer. She does restaurant promo. So it was like ideal. And the other had a ton of connections. And the four of us saw that our vision was aligned, saw that we could do it. And with four of us, none of us had to do it sort of full time. We could each pitch in enough. And so the logistics came together. And keep in mind, we went up there on a Sunday. We, you know, we saw it, fell in love with it, sort of mentioned this other couple as we knew might be interested in the owners, the people who had owned it at the time. We're like, oh yeah, they're thinking of putting in a bid. We called them on the way home, and we're like, hey, let's meet for a beer. So we met for a beer later that night. And then I think we had an offer in by Friday.
Oh,
it was almost so quick that I couldn't say no.
So you didn't know the people that you partnered with?
I did. It was a couple I knew. Steve knew them better.
Okay.
But I had met both of them before. I just didn't know them that well. I know them well now.
Isn't that crazy? That is so crazy.
Yeah. And I kind of think the lesson there is like saying yes. I don't know.
The yes and the Tina Fey yes and.
Yeah, like at least like not saying no at the outset. There's always a chance to say no down the road, but like let somebody ask the question first, right?
Well, it didn't seem like you had a chance to say no.
I didn't, and I thought it was good, and it's been this wonderful ride.
So tell me about having a toddler. What is that like, owning your business with a tot?
Well, before we go to that, I'd be curious to ask you the same question that you asked me about. What do you do for in-person stuff? Like, what do you, if you're somebody who needs that collaboration and that, like, how do you do that?
I mean, I don't think it's different from what you do. I think I don't like working from home because I don't know. I had to during COVID and it was so intense. I hated looking at my desk every day. And so I found an office space close by. And then I just told people I knew, hey, you want to, like, I paid the rent and I was like, you guys can move in and hang out here. So I had, Val and Bianca kind of hang out with me in the office. And then they both got sick. So I've been by myself in the office for about a year. And it's been hard. I definitely do more, like you said, set up more meetings outside. But also like juggling, taking care of my parents and my toddler. I find myself like today doing this from my mom's house because the older you get, the more people you got to take care of. So
yeah, from both ends, you got to like you didn't realize when you get to your 40s, you got to look both directions in terms
of. And
of
I'm tying everybody's shoes.
Yeah, it's a lot of butt wiping. Unexpected. Some expected, some unexpected.
So I mean, this podcast has definitely helped a lot because I think I like to keep it open and free to just to have, conversations about what's going on. It's funny. People ask me, do you listen to podcasts? I don't listen to podcasts actually, because I'm on the phone all the time. I call my mom, I call my friends. Like I'm always on the phone connecting. Like I always have somebody to talk to, somebody to call. I'm almost never listening to the radio anymore.
Yeah.
So
that's a good my wife, Kinsey, says that a lot. She's like, you're always, when you're in the car, it's like, who have I not talked to for a while?
Yeah, that's what I try to do. I'm like, if I'm in the car for longer than 5 minutes, then I'm calling somebody because that's how I get that connection. But then I wonder, like, for us, it's missing. Maybe the generation, millennial. Well, I guess you're a millennial, but like Gen X millennials, it's missing for us. I don't know if it's missing for the middle generation. And then like our toddlers are probably going to not grow up in that kind of COVID space. They'll probably switch back to like more of a balanced, but it's going to be this weird generation in the middle that I don't know if they're going to miss personal interaction.
Yeah, I think they will. I do think it's a tough sell because I think they grew up, not just the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, when everyone was still enamored with technology and what it could do, before we it feels like now we're starting to be like, oh my God, guys, we fucked up. Sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to. Like, we really screwed that. Like, maybe we shouldn't have gone as far into this as we are, right? There was this like I said, we were enamored with it. Like, nobody had qualms about Facebook for a decade, right? They grew up in that time. So it's I think both the perception they had on technology and then the pandemic where they like went all in. It does feel like there's some habits that'll need to be broken. But I'm optimistic. I've got a brother, kind of a half brother and half sister. But they grew up in the same household. So it's sort of de facto. They are 20. I hope they don't listen to this because I don't really know. Like 26 and 23 ish. And they're not mired in technology. You know what I mean? Like, they check Instagram a little bit. They're definitely, they check YouTube and Instagram and they're on the apps, but it's not like it's not the stereotype of somebody in their young 20s that a sitcom might put on, or that like Fox News is going to, hey, this is what's wrong with America. Like, they're very community oriented. They're very into like interpersonal relationships. Like, it's just not, I don't see the doom that everybody else does, but it's just two people,
So what's your take there? And there's a lot of backlash right now about people putting their kids on social media. I mean, how social media works. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't, if that's a useful indicator. I think it's a bigger problem about putting our lives on social media, right? That like it's replaced
telling stories,
sharing your kid with your community. Mm-hmm. It's replaced sharing your job, right? Like if you and I can't make jokes or talk about our accomplishments. Hey, I nailed this. I got coverage on this awesome thing. Yeah. And if I can walk to your office and tell you and celebrate with you, I don't need to throw that on Facebook, right? If I've got enough people and I'm out there doing this, they get to see Gus walk around and be this cool person. And I get to share his accomplishments and share his growth. I get to be the proud dad with the people in my life. And so I think it's like social media replacing that interaction. It's like the name social media is probably the biggest Trojan horse that we've swallowed in the last half a century, right? Is like, it is the opposite of. And so I think it's more that it's like, why do you feel the need to blast this out to people you don't really know? What's the validation you're trying to get? What are you trying to say? And then on the purely like, is it safe or not? Like, I don't think so. Yeah, I'll try and keep Gus off of it. And I would recommend against it. But there's probably things that are more dangerous to do for your kids. I'm not totally doom and gloom, but yeah. So I think it's more about some of that. Like, what are you getting? What are you trying to get when you post? And can you get that somewhere else? Especially with your kids, because your kids will really appreciate, if you're trying to show them off, your kids will really appreciate doing it in front of actual people instead of you filming them.
That's true. I do a little bit, but
I probably would. I just don't have it. I'm not. I have a Facebook account that I need to use for social media ads and stuff, and I'm not on Instagram or Twitter. Like, I've sort of kept those things during the pandemic when things were low. They were making me feel even worse about myself. So I cut the cord. 2 years clean.
Wow, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I can do it because I really do keep up with people that way. Like, I know what they're up to because I don't know. I use it as information for when I see them in person. I don't use it as information in replacement of. It's like, oh, right. That person was just on vacation. I'm going to talk about it with them when I see them.
I agree. And there were so many positives. I look back. It's easy to just dump on social media these days. But I think one of the cool things from like a social justice standpoint is the Time's Up movement.
Yeah.
There are not more or fewer women getting sexually harassed now than there have been through history, probably. Like, that's probably a pretty constant number. But I think where men specifically, or predators, or whoever, the aggressors in these situations got their power, is it makes people feel alone, right? It makes you feel really alone. And this whole Time's Up, the whole Me Too thing, I think drew a lot of power, and social media was very key in being like, I am not alone. There is a community out there. I have people that can empathize with me, and I have people that can share, and like somebody I can tell my story to who would know it. I think gave that movement a lot of power that it needed, right? That it hadn't had for millennia before that. That seems like really cool. I think that in its best, social media can make people feel less lonely, right? Like, there's all these underground communities, and it used to be if there wasn't one in your hometown, you had that interest or that thing alone, and now you can have it with other people, and that's really cool. I mean, one site that gets a lot of guff, but I think has its good corners, is Reddit. Like, there's these communities for everything, and probably 80% of them are like really positive, wholesome, supportive places for people to have these really niche interests. That's a cool thing, right? Mm-hmm. You know, and there's these other corners of it that are pretty dark. But this 80%, and like, how can we just make sure that that's not the end goal of like you posting, feeling like a community there? Like, how do we turn that into something else?
Yeah, that's it. Well, I guess that's your next $1 million then.
That is my next $1 million. That my first $1 million.
Your first million.
Can I pitch one of the things that I'm doing right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Keep an eye out for Electric Avenue this summer. So it's with Good Business Colorado. Speaking of in-person, they had asked us to like push a narrative on electric ovens and electric stoves. So to kind of encapsulate everything we've been talking about, instead of doing a bunch of videos that would get posted, what we're doing is in-person events at really popular places. We're doing one at the Stanley on a Saturday afternoon. That's June 8th. We're doing one at First Friday Town Hall Collective. That's July 5th. And we're having cooking demonstrations, and we're bringing in people to like actually see and feel and learn about these things together. And so instead of, like I said, a cool electrification video, we're going to have a live demonstration. We're going to put it where people are already gathering. We're going to make it a carnival atmosphere. We're going to have a really fun host. We're going to bring in people who can like set up tables and show the cool electric devices they're making. And it'll be this in-person thing as sort of an antidote. That's like an example of sort of what we do and what I think folks need to be doing on a lot of these issues.
There was other things we didn't get a chance to talk about. So of course we're going to have to schedule another one of these. But thanks for all of your work. Thanks for being a mentor to me. And I really just love working with you.
Yeah. Well, it's mutual. I actually consider you a mentor as well. It's I didn't know you thought of me that way. I'm kind of touched. So thanks for having me, and let's definitely do it again.
Thank you for watching Alvina Talks Shift. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, engage, empower, evolve. If you liked this episode, or if you want more content like this, go to alvinatalkshift.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.